Around 2 to 3 months ago, I uploaded a video talking about a very infamous side quest from Breath of the Wild called Special Delivery. It was a quest which involved bringing together a Hylian and Zora in a relationship heavily suggested to be romantic. The reason this was so controversial was due to the difference in age, given that the physique of Finley resembled a small child. The TLDR of this video was that a series of mistranslations done by the localization team ruined the side quest, and that, according to the Japanese version, it was originally a friendship sort of relationship. Throughout this video, I compared the localization to the original, and how the former not only references love more, but also added in additional dialogue not present in the Japanese version to presumably justify this weird age gap in the relationship. While this information is true, I've decided to unlist the video as other bits are factually incorrect. I'm going to quickly go over these corrections in this video, but first, I want to apologize to the localization team. While this video's primary intention was to discuss how an error in mistranslations ruined a Breath of the Wild side quest, the fact that additional sections of dialogue were included led me to suggest that they were aware of these inconsistencies of romance and were trying to push a weird romance sort of relationship between the two. At the time, this was because I was confident in what I said about no sort of romantic implications being present in the Japanese version. But even if there were no mistakes in the video, this comment is assuming the worst of a situation without considering that perhaps there was some sort of other reason. For example, the localization team may have only seen the text and not the character who said text belonged to. That might even be why they added in last-minute changes to the dialogue, since everyone included is related to the character's difference in age. In hindsight, what I really should have done was just leave it up to interpretation, because saying something like that is irresponsible on my part, especially since I don't know the whole story. If it was as simple as me being wrong about the topic of the video, then I could have just corrected it with a pinned comment. And given how the overall reception of the video is positive, I could have gotten away with that. But the inclusion of these comments in particular is why I'm making this its own separate video, as well as unlisting the original video. Personally speaking, I think it says a lot about someone when they own up to their mistakes, especially when you have that option of just not saying anything. Another reason why it's important is because the video in question is about a topic most of my audience does not know about. So when you hear me talk about a mistranslation, you just assume that I'm correct. This isn't the first time I've used translations, and it certainly isn't the last, but in this case, I messed up with the contents of the video, and again, I apologize to anyone involved in the localization. The video wasn't advertised nor intended to primarily be an exposed thing. I am not a drama channel. I'm simply one dude that talks a lot about The Legend of Zelda on YouTube. This is one of those videos I wish I could go back and recreate in hindsight, since the topic of mistranslations itself is the reason why I was interested in covering it in the first place. So, let's talk about the biggest error in this video. Ironically, it was an error born out of ignorance. I say ironically because a video going over mistranslations included information that, in itself, is a mistranslation. One part of the video that still holds up is the fact that, to my knowledge, the localization does include more references to romance, such as the message bottle being called a love letter and Sasan's frequent use of romantic-esque dialogue. However, in the video, I acknowledge that in the Japanese version, there are a few cases of love still being referenced, and that all of them come from the perspective of Finley. In the video, I looked at these examples and argued that these could be a non-romantic sort of love. One example is the phrase person of destiny, and how it could simply refer to someone you're destined to meet, which makes sense since the two had already been exchanging messages to one another. However, the ignorance bit comes from the fact that, according to some of the comments in that video, the term Finley uses, koi, is exclusively a word used for romantic relationships. And if that's the case, it means that the entire argument of love being added into the localization version is objectively untrue. So not only is what I said assuming the worst, but it's incorrect to begin with. Even if I kept the video up and corrected this with a pinned comment, I do not feel comfortable keeping that video public, especially since doing so after knowing of my mistake changes it from a mere error on my part to slander, since at this point I know that what I'm saying is false. The one other thing I want to quickly address is that, in the midst of editing this video, I had forgotten about another quote. This one has Finley go on about being at the age where she's a young woman, and that she simply hadn't yet experienced her growth spurt. I was going to add this in, but I decided to take a look at the Japanese version, and just like the other examples, this text was added into the localization version. In fact, when you compare the two dialogues, Finley only says one line for this bit. She states, "Even though I'm no longer a child." Some people thought I kept it out because it went against the conclusion of the video, but the reason I didn't think it was that big of a deal is because of what's said prior to that. Finley states that her mother isn't letting her go to the Bank of Wishes, which is followed up with this text. I simply took it as a kid telling their parents not to treat them as a kid after being told not to do something, which is something that happens often. Errors aside, if I knew that it would have caused this much of an issue, I would have included it. It also doesn't help that in Tears of the Kingdom, she appears to be the same size. They could have fixed this by having her age by a significant amount, and I'm not sure why this wasn't done, as it would have made this less strange. But the biggest takeaway from all of this is that romance was already a thing in the original, and that the localization team was probably just trying to make it less creepy by adding in dialogue. That, or it's something else we don't know about. But again, I apologize for my mistake, and I promise that I'll be more careful in the future. Lastly, I wanted to use this opportunity to find a way to get some good out of the situation. Because of that, I've decided to donate a significant chunk of that video's revenue to charity, and that includes the revenue from that video's sponsor. Given the topic, I chose to donate to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and I'll have a link to their donation page in the description below. This video will also stay unmonetized since the intention is not to make a profit, but rectify these mistakes. Aside from that, thank you for sticking with me until the end. I feel a lot better putting this video out there, and stay tuned for future Zelda videos on Tears of the Kingdom. The first one is a tips and tricks video which should be out in the next week or so. I've been Nintendo Black Crisis, and I'll see you all next time.